Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'd love to see in the chat, where are you calling from? I'd love to see that. Okay, from Seattle. Yep, that's where I'm calling in from as well. New York. My home away from home. I've lived in New York for about 10 years. So New York is really near and dear to my heart. I'll be letting in people as we begin, but I just want to thank you all for coming to this workshop called Storytelling for Your Brand Promise. My name's Annabelle Quintero. I am a storytelling coach, best-selling author. I have a master's in education policy and leadership, and I'm also a speaker advocate coach for Lisa Nichols. And I'd love to hear, what industry do you all work in? If you could put that in chat, that'd be great. That helps me with knowing what brought you here. Okay, technology. Okay, yeah, great. Well, how many of you have had a story that you've really wanted to share, but for some reason you just don't know how to include it in your pitch or during a meeting? I just wanted to see if you could type that in chat as well. Maybe write, how many stories do you feel like, oh, I want to talk about this one, but you have no idea how to integrate it or how it's relevant? 5, okay. And 2, okay. Interesting. Interesting to see all these numbers. You see, I was just like you. I found myself always sharing stories of overcoming a limiting mindset. When I was younger, I had always wanted to model, but was too afraid to tell anyone that I wanted to do it because I was afraid they'd think I'm superficial or conceited. And so I never shared with anyone that that was truly my dream. So I finally had the nerve to go pack up my things and move from Seattle all the way to New York and take a bite out of that big apple. And there I was like, oh yes, I have the destiny in my hands. I was actually able to model. I was dancing, and I landed this great job at this boutique hedge fund. Literally, I was like, I am living my dreams. And one day at work, I was, printing out the portfolio, getting ready for the stock market like anyone else. And all of a sudden I felt something just fall on my building. And I was like, what was that? And then I just moved from side to side. It's like, whatever hit this building is like, now there's an earthquake. So I ran out to my boss's window and I was like, okay, let me see what's happening. And everything seemed fine. And then the rumbling began again. And I was like, okay, I grabbed my sweater and my purse and I just ran to the door. And there I was like, met with this man with all his fright just shooting out of his eyes. And we had a moment there just to meet each other's humanity. But before we could say a word to each other, the building started trembling again. And it was like another earthquake. And he ran back into his office and there I was left alone, not knowing what was happening, not knowing what fell on my building, not knowing why there's an earthquake, no announcement. And I was like, Dios mío, ¿qué hago? Dear God, what do I do? And right then in that moment, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe I could go under the desk because there's an earthquake and you're supposed to take cover. But it was full of boxes. And then I looked up, and in the office, there was, where there used to be sunshine, it was just this muted gray. And I knew that was not a place for me. That day, I ended up at a stairwell, confronted with this invisible stench that was singeing my nose and my lungs and my throat. And there was a fire, and I realized I had to get out of my building. And so I put my hand on the railing, and I stepped with my left, and I stepped with my right, and I jumped on the landing, and I step, jumped, and I step, jumped down 46 flights. I made it out of the One World Trade Center on September 11th. And this story, I would hear from people every September 11th. Everyone has a September 11th story. And I was always captivated how traumatized people were. And they weren't even in the building like I was, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Everyone knows where, if they're old enough, everyone knows where they were on September 11th. And so I share that because it took me almost 20 years to share that. I survived. And I realized a few things within those years, that each story that we have has tremendous amount of emotions around that story. And that most of the time, what we tend to do is we are told by society that because emotions are not viewed as professional, because we are defined by how objective and linear we are, that in our professional spaces and in places where we are growing our business, we're not supposed to share our emotions. And so many of these stories are never shared and are never told. And that's why I'm here. That's why you signed up. I'm here because I want to help you with your story and with all the emotions that are surrounding that story. Because I know that as we share that story, something happens within us where we grow personally, where our audience gets to connect with us and see us and meet our humanity. And people now understand your why. They understand why you do the things you do, why you're leading the team, why you are growing your business, whatever it is, right? You could be a leader, you could be an entrepreneur, and people then connect with you in a whole other way. And so your brand, yes, of course, it's how you are going to help them, right? With a good or a product. But most importantly, you've made a promise to them by sharing that story. That becomes storytelling as your brand promise. So I'd like to share my screen with you. Great. And let me see if I can. I want to make sure that I can. Okay. Okay, no, that's not going to work. Okay, I wanted to see if I could make it bigger. There we go. Well, here we go. So after this whole ordeal, right? I mean, here I am surviving September 11th, and I'm realizing that there's stories that I want to help people with, right? I didn't know that until this one moment. I actually ran for public office. And here I am running for public office, and you have your stump speech, and I had it. And I decided to talk about September 11th. And I found myself on stage, like frozen. And I was like, oh my goodness, what did I just do? And that was a moment where here I am living out loud, running for a state Senate seat. And then I realized, oh my goodness, I'm not ready to share the story. And so are any of you like truly, have you found yourself in that place where you've actually shared and you realize you're not really ready to share it? And you can put it in the chat. You haven't dared. Well, that's one of the reasons why I am so passionate about this, is to really, I have seen how storytelling is something that storytelling is your brand promise, but it's also storytelling as a spiritual practice. It's also storytelling for, I'm going to have to stop sharing because you can't see the screen properly. Storytelling to impact policy. So I help advocates and people that are thinking about running for office. I also, of course, help executives and leaders with storytelling. One of the things that helped me with sharing my story was something that I have my clients work through is, let's observe yourself. Pick a story and let's observe ourselves through that story. Let's observe ourselves, what's going on in our mind, what's going on with our body, like our bodily sensations, and what emotions are coming up in our hearts. Are we angry? Like, what is really coming up? And those three pillars, is a dynamic between your mind, your emotions, and your bodily sensations. So write that down. Those are the three pillars of human behavior. And one of the things that's so profound is to actually go through and pick a story that you haven't shared and journal what comes up with the story. So first, if everyone can grab a piece of paper, let's just do it now. Draw a triangle. And on the top of the triangle, on your page, yep, anywhere, put basically a sentence or a title of that story. And you know what the story is, right? But it could be anything. It could be argument with husband, or divorce, or the diagnosis, or it could be anything that you haven't shared with your team. And then you're going to go around, you're going to fill that part out, right? You're going to fill out what actually happened in the story. As you are writing that out, things are going to come up in your body. So observe. So in the bodily, on the bottom right-hand side of the triangle, write what's going on with your body. Are you cold? Are you flush? Are you like blushing? Are is your heart beating fast, or are you getting goosebumps? Are you feeling cold? All of that. Put all of that there. And then what emotions are coming up? What are you feeling? And as you do that, you're completing a whole triangle and a whole pattern around the story. And this is really crucial because this allows you to observe yourself, to understand yourself. Because one of the things that I learned early on was that if I don't, with any story I'm not sharing, if I don't acknowledge that it triggers me, or that it could, it doesn't have to be traumatic, but if it triggers you and that's why you don't share it, you have to acknowledge that it does trigger you. Now, you may know that intuitively, that's why you're staying silent. That's why you're hiding that story, right? You're not sharing it with anyone. But sometimes it's hard to admit that, like, oh yeah, acknowledging that it triggers me. And then it's like, that's the first step, is the acknowledgement. And that's why it's good to pick a story you haven't shared, because that's where your work comes from. That's where your work is. And then the second step is, okay, as I do this triangle, this is actually practicing self-awareness. Just journaling around this triangle is practicing self-awareness. Some people do it through meditation, but if you can't get yourself to do that, that's fine, but you can journal. And the reason why is when you're done, and you can keep writing, but I'm just talking as you're writing, right? As you complete this triangle for that story, you actually now get to understand, okay, this is a story. This is the emotions that come up. This is how my body feels. And then you now understand why you don't share it with someone. You actually understand yourself more because of it. Now you have the opportunity to decide, okay, we can catalog this story. So you will write a title for the story. And then this is one story that I haven't shared. And then let's go deeper. What is a lesson that you learned from that story? So how are we doing on time? Do you think you have some of the triangle done already? And you can put it in the comments, and you can pause, right? Later on, if you need to pause at this moment, that's fine. You can pause here and continue doing the journal, and then you can start the video again if you need to, once you get the recording. But if not, then what you can do now is, what did you learn from that situation? So what's your lesson? Because no matter how painful a story is, for me, so many different lessons. I learned, for me, that watching my human behavior was extremely important for me to manage and monitor and mitigate my PTSD. So that was extremely important for me. And the other thing that I learned was, because in my mind, because of the trauma, there were so many things. I mean, here I was working on Wall Street. I had studied political science. I'm a very spiritual woman, and I couldn't manage my nerves and my body. So I always had to ground myself every morning. But I also needed to know and direct my mind. And so one of my lessons was I'm a researcher. I love learning and diving deep. And so I would spend time in my spirituality, a lot of time. Or I would dedicate time, okay, this is the political component. This is what's happening with relationships. This is what's happening right now in New York. And that would be one pocket of, okay, I'm making some efforts here. And then the other part that I would do is, in the financial and the markets, I would read what's happening with the markets, what's going on. And those were the three ways that I would balance my time and my mind. And the moment that I would try to mix them up, that's when I was like, okay, no, stay in your lane. If Annabelle, I tell myself, stay in your lane. If you're doing finance and even a conversation with someone, stay with finance. Don't go and bring in spirituality, or don't go and bring in politics. Like, keep them separate. And that really helped me. That helped me to keep studying, stay in those realms, and also be able to finish a conversation, be coherent, not be everywhere. And so that was a lesson for me. That was something that I learned. Not only did I learn about the 3 pillars of my human behavior, but I learned I can manage my mind and my energy in these 3 areas of the world, or life, if you want to say. So that was extremely important to me. And so write some of the lessons that you have on that, for that story. And here's the other thing that I think is extremely important is, as you move forward, understanding yourself, think about, you have the lesson. Now, can this lesson be integrated? Is it the type of lesson that could be integrated? Is it a personal development? Does it help yourself grow? Do you want a team member to grow? Is it something that shows resilience? Does it show consistency or discipline? Or is it hopeful? Right? Because I think that is powerful to know. What is the lesson? Can you think of, and let's put that in the chat. What is a word that you could use to describe that story? Does it help with resilience? Is it hopeful? Is it inspirational? Is it unbelievable? Like, people are going to be like, what? Like, that's one thing that I get. People can't believe that I survived September 11th. It even almost always jars me because I've lived with it. I'm like, okay, I'm a September 11th survivor. But then other people are like, oh my goodness, like, I've never met anyone who made it out. And because that day was so collectively traumatizing, it's like, wow, like, people just are in awe. So what is that for you? That helps to really know that. The other thing that helps with being able to describe the story is to really think about, am I not sharing the story for 3 reasons? Is it because I haven't really written out the story and I don't really have it all laid out in my mind? Or is it that intellectually, I don't know what I would be teaching from that story? So that's 2. So 1, have you written out the story? 2, intellectually, what's the lesson there? And then 3 is your ego. Our ego is how we want to present ourselves to the world. So are you not sharing the story because you don't know if that story is going to help how you want to show up in the world? That's what our ego helps us with. It's like, okay, we identify like this, and this is how we're showing up in the world, and it helps us. And healthy ego is really important, right? And so which one is it? Is it your mind? Is it the story that you haven't written it out completely? Is it that you're not clear on what you're teaching? Or is it that you don't know if it really aligns with your ego or not? Those are important things to know. Those are more questions for yourself to truly understand why you've been silent. And so your brand promise is really what service you provide or product you provide. It's also your messaging, right? I'm sure there's some type of message that you have where you're talking about your brand, or you're talking about the story, like what is the story, right, behind the brand. And then usually people will have a pitch. And so your messaging and your story can be integrated. Your pitch can also be an invitation. You can actually just invite people to, here's how I help people, and inviting them to work with you. So what I wonder if you have any questions. Are there any questions on that so far? Okay. So as you move forward with building your business, building your team, one of the best things you could do, especially if you're building out your team, is how can you collaborate with team members to come up with some stories that talk about what your company does? Cataloging those stories together, collectively. And these could be stories of being together, maybe at a conference. This could be stories of when you started building your business, how you met your partner, maybe how you met your business partner, or how you met an investor, or also just the sweat equity, those sweat equity moments, burning the midnight oil, right? And taking us in that moment where you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to make it tomorrow, something, right? Those are all really helpful. And having your team come up with some of those stories is very profound, because the more that they're able to storytell about your business and about your brand, or whatever goods and services you offer, the better salespeople they're going to be. And sometimes, if it's a very organic story, people will feel much more comfortable doing that than actual pitching. So view storytelling as another way to truly seed and another way to pitch, because you might have someone on your team that is still working through a money mindset and is still feeling a little uncomfortable about selling. But the moment that they can share stories, they're all in. Let me tell you what happened, right? And I think that that's another way to help your team members to build their leadership capacity, to allow them to truly be part of the team and grow. And you finally get to actually collectively storytell as your brand promise. So please download, if you'd like what you heard, download the Wellness Journal. I will put the link in the comments below. Each sheet should be one completed triangle. Only do one per day because they all bring up many different emotions, and it's exhausting. So, but allow yourself to move through that. And remember, as things come up, watch. What you're doing is observing, and you're observing without judgment, but you're observing and you're writing it down. The mind, the emotions, the bodily sensations. And that dynamic is perpetual. Anytime you have any thought, anytime the emotion comes up, anytime you feel something, that is constant. That dynamic is endless. It's happening all the time. It's happening right now as you're watching this video. So allow yourself to observe, practice self-awareness. And then once you have the lessons from that one triangle, and once you go through and really identify, okay, why haven't I shared this story? Ask those 3 questions. Is it because I don't have a chronological memory of it? Or is it the fact that I don't know what I'm going to teach from the story intellectually? What am I teaching? Or is it that you're questioning how you want to present yourself in this world? Those 3 questions, your ego, those 3 questions help. And even as you ask yourself those questions too, know that your story doesn't always have to completely align with your brand and product, but what it does do is it allows people to see you as a whole human being. People will remember your story even more than your company name. People sometimes, they know Step, Step, Jump. They may not know Annabelle Quintero, but they know Step, Step, Jump. So I hope that this helps. I want to hear how this served you. And most importantly, I'd love to hear how the Wellness Journal is going. So leave comments. I'll put the link there for you. You can download it for free. And it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to uncover these stories with you. If you're interested in working with me with one-on-one, I create safe spaces for leaders and help them achieve visions larger than themselves. Feel free to email me at annabelle@stepstepjump.com. You have a lovely evening.